What if I told you that technology did not begin with the Industrial Revolution, but thousands of years earlier? That long before steam engines, before electricity, even before the written word was widespread, there were devices carved into stone and metal. Devices claiming powers we can barely comprehend today. This isn't speculation whispered in fringe circles. It's documented in ancient texts, depicted in temple reliefs, and buried beneath layers of earth. Mechanisms so precise they challenge our understanding of history. Objects that computed celestial movements, generated power, and perhaps even flew. And then, suddenly, the knowledge vanished. The machines fell silent. How could ancient craftsmen have created instruments so advanced? Were these inventions purely human, or were they gifts from something else? The Watchers, the beings who descended from above. And if their technology was real, what traces remain hidden beneath our feet? Tonight, we examine the artifacts. We step into workshops long abandoned. And we ask the forbidden question, did humanity once possess technology that surpassed our own, only to lose it in the mists of time? Before archaeology became a science, before museums preserved the past, there were whispers. Stories of ancient peoples who possessed knowledge beyond their era. The Greeks spoke of Daedalus and his inventions. The Indians recorded flying machines called vimanas. The Egyptians built structures that modern engineers struggle to replicate. These were not dismissed as mere legends by everyone. Some saw in them fragments of memory, echoes of a technological age now lost. This is where our story begins, with objects that should not exist. Devices pulled from ruins and ocean floors, from deserts and caves, objects that defy the timeline we've been taught. They are known to scholars as out-of-place artifacts, anachronisms that challenge chronology. To those who examine them closely, however, they are nothing less than proof that history is incomplete, that our ancestors knew far more than we credit them with, and that perhaps they were taught by beings who walked among them. Imagine standing in a museum, not large, perhaps a single room in Athens, looking at a corroded lump of bronze and wood. The object is unremarkable to most visitors. Roughly the size of a shoebox, recovered from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901. At first glance, it was just another piece of debris from a Roman-era vessel. And yet, when researchers finally examined it closely decades later, what they found inside changed everything. Gears. Dozens of interlocking bronze gears, precision-cut, arranged in a mechanism of stunning complexity. To the modern mind, it is impossible. No device of such sophistication should exist from 150 BCE. No ancient civilization was supposed to understand differential gears, epicyclic systems, or astronomical computation at this level. And yet, the Antikythera mechanism does all these things. It predicted eclipses, tracked the movements of planets, calculated the phases of the moon, and even adjusted for the irregular orbit of our satellite. It is, in essence, the world's first analog computer, built 2,000 years before Charles Babbage conceived of his difference engine. Scholars were stunned. How could the ancients create such a device? Some argued it must be unique, an anomaly, the work of a single genius lost to time. Others pointed to references in ancient texts suggesting such instruments were not uncommon. Cicero wrote of a device made by Archimedes that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. Posidonius reportedly constructed a similar machine. Perhaps the Antikythera mechanism was not singular but representative of a lost tradition, a technological lineage erased by time and catastrophe. The mechanism itself whispers of this loss. It was found in a shipwreck, suggesting it was being transported when disaster struck. Was it being moved to safety? Was it a trade good, a gift, or perhaps salvage from an already ruined workshop? We cannot know. But its presence in the sea, rather than in a temple or palace, suggests that by the time the ship sank, the knowledge of how to build such devices was already fading, already rare enough to be precious. Consider the implications. If the Greeks of the 2nd century BCE possessed computing machines, what else did they have? What other technologies have been lost, their remnants melted down for metal, their wooden components rotted away, their very existence forgotten? The Antikythera mechanism survived only because it was submerged in seawater, the anaerobic environment preserving the bronze. How many others corroded to dust in air, their gears scattered, their purpose forgotten? This paradox sits at the heart of the mystery of lost technology. We find a device of immense sophistication, yet it stands alone. No workshops full of similar machines. No instruction manuals. No chain of development showing how the Greeks arrived at such knowledge. It appears, fully formed, and then vanishes, as if the knowledge came from elsewhere and departed just as suddenly. Some researchers point to this as evidence of outside intervention. If technology descended from the sky, they argue, it would leave exactly this pattern: advanced devices appearing without precedent, flourishing briefly, then disappearing when the teachers departed. The Watchers, the ancient ones who descended in fire, perhaps left behind not just myths but machines. For now, let us linger with that bronze mechanism in its glass case. A small, corroded object, scarcely larger than a book, yet containing within it proof that the ancients were far more sophisticated than we imagined. Gears cut with precision, knowledge of astronomy that would not be matched again until the Renaissance, understanding of mathematics that speaks of study and instruction spanning generations. And all of it lost, surviving only by accident, pulled from the sea by sponge divers who had no idea what they had found. It is here that our journey begins. In the museums and excavation sites, among the artifacts that whisper of a time when humanity possessed knowledge now forgotten. Among the devices that should not exist, yet do. Among the mechanisms that speak of teachers who came, taught, and then left, taking their secrets with them into the sky. In the Valley of the Kings, beneath the scorching sun of Upper Egypt, temples rise from the sand. These are not crude structures but monuments of precision. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built supposedly around 2560 BCE, contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 80 tons. The blocks are fitted together with such accuracy that a blade cannot slip between them. No mortar holds them. Only precision. Modern engineers have attempted to replicate this feat. They have failed. Even with laser-guided cutting tools, cranes, and computer modeling, the precision of the pyramid blocks remains elusive. The ancient Egyptians, we are told, accomplished this with copper tools, wooden sledges, and rope. Yet copper cannot cut granite. Wood and rope cannot move 80-ton blocks up steep ramps with the precision required. Something is missing from our understanding. Inside the Great Pyramid, the King's Chamber contains granite blocks weighing 70 tons, lifted 60 meters above ground level. The Grand Gallery ascends at a precise angle, its corbelled walls meeting in a ceiling so exact that its sides are parallel within millimeters over a span of 47 meters. This is not the work of simple laborers with primitive tools. This is the work of master engineers with technology we do not see in the archaeological record. The mystery deepens when we examine the purpose of these structures. For centuries, Egyptologists insisted the pyramids were tombs, nothing more. Yet no mummy has ever been found in the Great Pyramid. No hieroglyphics adorn its interior. No treasures filled its chambers. Instead, we find curious features: shafts aligned to specific stars, chambers positioned with mathematical precision, acoustic properties that amplify certain frequencies, and mineral deposits suggesting water once flowed through its passages. Some researchers propose the pyramids were not tombs but machines. Power plants, perhaps, generating energy through piezoelectric effects in the granite, amplified by the pyramid's shape and position. Others suggest they were astronomical computers, their passages aligned to track celestial movements over thousands of years. Still others believe they were built by a civilization far older than dynastic Egypt, a civilization that possessed technology we have yet to understand. Evidence for this older civilization appears in the erosion patterns of the Sphinx. Geologists examining the weathering on its body note vertical erosion patterns consistent with heavy rainfall. Yet the Sahara has been arid for over 5,000 years. The last time Egypt experienced rainfall heavy enough to cause such erosion was before 10,000 BCE. If the Sphinx dates to this period, it predates Egyptian civilization by thousands of years. Who carved it? And what technology did they possess? The tools themselves present problems. The precision-drilled holes in granite, some containing spiral grooves suggesting drill bits advancing faster than modern diamond-tipped tools. The perfectly flat surfaces on massive stone blocks, accurate to within fractions of a millimeter across several meters. The transportation and placement of obelisks weighing hundreds of tons, standing upright without breaking. Each of these feats suggests technology beyond what we attribute to the ancients. And then there are the texts. The pyramid texts, the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, all speak of the first time, a golden age when gods walked the earth and taught humanity the arts of civilization. They describe flying boats, weapons that shot fire, and objects that generated light without flame. Were these merely poetic metaphors, or were they descriptions of actual technology, written by people trying to describe machines they could barely understand? The Egyptian priest Manetho, writing in the 3rd century BCE, recorded a history of Egypt that extended back 36,000 years. He spoke of dynasties of gods who ruled before the human pharaohs, beings who possessed divine knowledge and power. Modern scholars dismiss this as mythology. But what if Manetho was preserving ancient records, chronicles of a time when advanced beings lived in Egypt and built structures that have outlasted empires? Imagine Egypt in this lost age. Not the desert we see today, but a green land, rivers flowing, forests covering what is now sand. In this landscape, beings of great knowledge arrive. They bring with them understanding of mathematics, astronomy, engineering. They teach the people how to quarry stone, how to lift massive weights, how to align structures to the stars. They oversee the construction of monuments designed to last forever, to survive even the catastrophe they know is coming. And then they leave, or they die, or they are destroyed in whatever cataclysm turned Egypt from paradise to desert. The people they taught try to maintain the traditions. They continue to build, but each generation loses a little more knowledge. The tools break and cannot be replaced. The techniques are forgotten. Within a few centuries, the descendants of the builders can only stare at the monuments and wonder how their ancestors accomplished such feats. This pattern appears worldwide. In Peru, massive stone blocks at Sacsayhuaman fit together with the same impossible precision as Egyptian temples. In Lebanon, the stones of Baalbek include blocks weighing over 1,000 tons, moved and placed with no explanation of how. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture yet displays sophisticated stone carving and astronomical alignment. Everywhere we look, we find evidence of advanced construction followed by decline, as if the knowledge came suddenly and departed just as quickly. The orthodox explanation is convergent evolution of technique. Humans in different locations independently developed similar methods. But this explanation struggles with the timing. These sites appear in eras when humans were supposedly hunter-gatherers, lacking the organization, tools, or knowledge for such projects. Yet the monuments stand, impossible to ignore, demanding explanation. From the perspective of lost technology, the answer is simpler. These structures were built by or with the assistance of beings who possessed advanced knowledge. They used technologies we no longer understand, tools that have not survived, methods that were not passed down. When they departed or died, humanity was left with monuments they could not replicate and stories they transformed into myths. As we continue this journey, we will examine specific technologies, devices that generated power, machines that flew, weapons that unleashed destruction. But the pyramids and megaliths remind us that the greatest evidence of lost technology may not be portable devices but the structures themselves. Buildings that have stood for millennia, built with precision we cannot match, testifying to knowledge we have yet to recover. In the ruins of ancient Baghdad, in what was once Mesopotamia, archaeologists in 1936 uncovered a curious object. A clay jar, roughly 14 centimeters tall, sealed with asphalt. Inside, a copper cylinder. Within that, an iron rod. The components showed signs of corrosion from an acidic substance. When examined by Wilhelm Koenig, the German archaeologist who found it, he proposed something remarkable. This was a battery, a galvanic cell capable of generating electrical current, dated to approximately 250 BCE or earlier. The Baghdad battery, as it became known, sparked immediate controversy. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed it as a storage vessel for scrolls or simply a curiosity. But replicas were built and tested. When filled with an acidic solution like vinegar or wine, they produced between 0.8 and nearly 2 volts of electricity. Not much by modern standards, but enough to electroplate objects, to create a mild shock, or perhaps to power small devices. If the ancients possessed batteries, what did they use them for? Some suggest electroplating, coating objects with thin layers of gold or silver. Evidence of electroplated artifacts exists in museums, objects that show uniform metallic coatings impossible to achieve with fire-based techniques. Others propose medical uses, electrical stimulation for pain relief, a practice that would not be discovered in the West until the 18th century. Still others imagine religious applications, devices that created static charges or mild shocks to awe temple visitors, making idols seem alive with divine power. The Baghdad battery was not unique. Similar devices have been found in Egypt and other parts of the Middle East. This suggests not an isolated experiment but a technology known across cultures, used for purposes we can only guess at. And like so many ancient technologies, the knowledge of how to build and use them vanished, surviving only in scattered artifacts that archaeologists debate to this day. Imagine a temple in ancient Mesopotamia. Darkness fills the sanctum except for a strange glow, a light that does not flicker like flame. Priests move between columns, their hands touching copper wires hidden in the stone. The wires lead to chambers beneath the floor where rows of clay jars sit, each one generating its small current. The currents combine to power lamps or create sparks. To the worshippers, it is divine magic. To the priests, it is technology, knowledge passed down from the builders, from the gods who taught their ancestors. But the knowledge is already fading. Fewer priests understand the principles. The batteries break and cannot always be repaired. Within generations, the system fails completely, and the temple returns to torches and oil lamps. The memory of electric light becomes myth, a tale of gods who made stones glow, dismissed by later ages as superstition. Far to the east, in the Sanskrit texts of ancient India, descriptions of technology proliferate. The Vimanas, flying machines, feature prominently in the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Vaimanika Shastra. These are not vague metaphors but detailed accounts of construction, operation, and capabilities. The Vaimanika Shastra, attributed to the sage Bharadvaja and transcribed in the early 20th century from ancient sources, describes multiple types of flying machines. In the ruins of Mohenjo-daro, an ancient city in Pakistan, archaeologists found skeletons lying in the streets, their bones showing signs of sudden death. The bodies were not buried but left where they fell. Some skeletons showed radiation levels higher than normal background radiation even today, thousands of years later. Nearby, areas of sand and rock have been vitrified, melted into glass by intense heat. This occurs naturally only in lightning strikes or nuclear detonations. The scale of vitrification at Mohenjo-daro suggests something far more powerful than lightning. What destroyed this city? What weapon could produce heat intense enough to melt stone, radiation that persists for millennia, and death so sudden people fell in their tracks? The Sanskrit texts provide an answer, one that makes modern readers uncomfortable. They describe aerial warfare, flying machines dropping weapons of terrible power, battles that laid waste to entire regions. If even a fraction of these accounts are true, then ancient India possessed technology that rivaled or exceeded our own, at least in certain domains. And like all the other lost technologies, it vanished. The machines stopped flying. The weapons were lost or destroyed. The knowledge faded until only texts remained, texts that later generations read as mythology rather than history. Imagine the moment when the last Vimana flew. Perhaps it was during a great war, the conflict described in the Mahabharata. Perhaps the pilot knew it was the end, that the technology was failing, that no one remained who could repair the complex mechanisms. The machine rises one final time, hovering over a burning city, and then descends, never to fly again. Within years, it is scavenged for metal. Within decades, it is forgotten. Within centuries, it is myth. In the deserts of the Middle East, another technological mystery awaits. The Ark of the Covenant, described in the Bible with precise engineering specifications. Made of acacia wood, covered in gold inside and out, with a crown of gold around the rim. Its lid, the mercy seat, featured two golden cherubim facing each other, their wings touching. Poles of acacia wood, also covered in gold, were inserted through rings to carry it. No one was to touch the ark itself, under penalty of death. The specifications are given in Exodus with the detail of an engineering manual. Dimensions, materials, construction techniques. The ark was said to contain the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, but its powers extended far beyond storage. It leveled walls, as at Jericho. It struck down those who touched it improperly, as with Uzzah who reached out to steady it and died instantly. It communicated, God speaking from between the cherubim, his voice emerging from the Arkansas. It glowed with light, leading the Israelites through the desert. Some researchers propose the ark was an electrical device, a large capacitor capable of storing significant charge. The gold coating would conduct electricity. The wooden core would insulate. The design, with 2 layers of gold separated by wood, matches that of a Leyden jar, one of the first capacitors developed in the 18th century. If charged, either through static electricity generated by movement through dry desert air or through some other means, the ark could deliver potentially lethal shocks to anyone who touched it. This would explain the deaths. It would explain why only certain priests, wearing specific garments, could approach it safely. Linen and wool, the materials specified for priestly garments, have different electrical properties. Worn together in the right configuration, they could provide some protection against shock. The cherubim on top, facing each other with wings nearly touching, would create a gap. If the ark held a charge, this gap could produce visible sparks, arcs of electricity jumping between the golden figures. To ancient observers, this would appear as divine fire, the presence of God made visible. The voice of God speaking from the ark might have been produced through electromagnetic effects, vibrations in the metal creating sounds, or perhaps through some more sophisticated acoustic system we do not understand. When the ark was carried, the poles ensured the bearers did not touch the device itself, preventing accidental discharge. When placed in the tabernacle or temple, it sat in a special room, insulated from the ground, maintained by priests who understood its properties if not its full principles. The ark's ultimate fate is unknown. Biblical accounts suggest it was hidden before the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BCE. Some believe it is buried beneath the Temple Mount. Others claim it was taken to Ethiopia, where the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum reportedly guards it to this day, though no one is allowed to see it. If the ark was indeed a technological device, its disappearance marks another point where ancient knowledge vanished. The priests who knew how to maintain it died or were killed. The device was hidden away. And without it, its purpose and capabilities became legend. Imagine the last priest who truly understood the Arkansas standing in the temple as Babylonian armies approach, knowing the sacred object must be hidden. He seals it in a chamber deep beneath the foundation, a place so secret that even other priests do not know its location. He leaves instructions, but they are cryptic, coded. He hopes future generations will decode them, will find the ark and restore its function. But generations pass. The codes are not broken. The knowledge dies with him. The ark remains hidden, if it survived at all, its technology inert, its secrets sealed beneath stone and earth. Throughout the ancient world, temples hold curious secrets. At Dendera in Egypt, a relief on the wall of a crypt shows what appears to be a large bulb or tube, mounted on a pillar, with a serpent-like filament inside. Attached to the base is a box from which cables extend. The image is startling because it resembles, in every detail, a Crookes tube, an early electrical discharge lamp invented in the 19th century. Orthodox Egyptologists interpret the image symbolically, claiming it represents a lotus flower or a mythological scene. But the resemblance to electrical equipment is precise. The bulb shape, the internal filament, the power source, even the insulators holding the device all match what we would expect to see in a schematic of an electric lamp. If the Egyptians possessed electric lighting, many mysteries resolve. The interiors of pyramids and tombs show no soot on their ceilings, despite being decorated with intricate paintings and hieroglyphs that would have required significant light to create. Torches and oil lamps leave residue. Electric lights do not. The shafts and passages in the Great Pyramid could have served as conduits for wiring. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber, made of granite containing high quartz content, could have acted as a piezoelectric generator when subjected to vibration or pressure. Combined with the pyramid's position and shape, focusing telluric currents from the earth, the structure might have generated enough power to light lamps throughout its passages. At Karnak, at Luxor, at temples throughout Egypt, similar reliefs appear. Images that look like transformers, like insulators, like transmission equipment. Taken individually, they might be coincidence. Taken together, they suggest a system, an electrical network powering lights and perhaps other devices throughout the temple complexes. And then the knowledge vanished. The priests who maintained the system died. The equipment degraded beyond repair. Future generations plastered over the reliefs, painted new images, forgot what the old ones meant. The temples went dark, lit once again by flickering flames. In the highlands of Tibet, legends speak of monks who could move massive stones using only sound. Chanting in specific frequencies, playing drums and long horns in coordinated patterns, they could levitate rocks weighing several tons. Western observers in the early 20th century claim to have witnessed these demonstrations, though photographic evidence remains disputed. The principle is not fantasy. Acoustic levitation is a confirmed phenomenon. Sound waves at certain frequencies can create standing waves in air, pressure nodes where objects become weightless and can be suspended or moved. Modern laboratories demonstrate this with small objects, pellets and droplets held in midair by precisely tuned sound fields. Could the ancients have scaled this technology to move stones? The engineering would be formidable but not impossible. Large horns and drums creating low-frequency sound. Curved reflectors focusing the waves. Operators who understood through trial and error which frequencies worked on which materials. Knowledge passed down through generations, preserved in monasteries, practiced in secret. If such technology existed, it would explain much. How did ancient builders move megaliths without machinery? Acoustic levitation. How did they position stones with impossible precision? By floating them into place, weightless, adjustable with the slightest touch. The Coral Castle in Florida, built by Edward Leedskalnin between 1923 and 1951, may preserve echoes of this knowledge. Working alone, often at night, Leedskalnin quarried and moved massive coral blocks weighing up to 30 tons. He erected them into walls, carved them into furniture, balanced them as gates that moved with the touch of a finger. When asked how he accomplished this, Leedskalnin spoke of understanding the secrets of the pyramids, of discovering how the Egyptians worked. He claimed to have learned magnetic principles that allowed him to manipulate weight. Photographs show him with simple tools, tripods and chains, nothing that should be capable of moving 30-ton blocks. Yet he did it, alone, without modern equipment. After his death, engineers examined his property. Some blocks showed evidence of electromagnetic alteration, changes in the stone's crystalline structure consistent with exposure to strong magnetic fields. Did Leedskalnin rediscover a lost technology? Did he use sound, magnetism, or both to reduce the effective weight of stone? He left few writings, and those are cryptic. His secrets died with him, another case of knowledge possessed briefly and then lost. Imagine ancient Egypt, ancient Peru, ancient Lebanon. Workers gather around a massive stone. Priests or engineers position horns and drums at specific distances and angles. The sound begins, deep and resonant, felt more than heard. The stone vibrates. Its weight lessens. With ropes and levers, workers guide it into position, floating it up ramps that could never bear its weight if it were fully heavy. The sound stops. The stone settles, perfectly placed. To the workers, it is magic, the power of the gods made manifest through the priests. To the priests, it is technology, knowledge given by the gods when they walked among men. But the knowledge is fragile. It requires understanding not just of what to do but why. It requires instruments maintained with precision. When the civilization falls, when the priesthood is decimated, the knowledge fragments. Later generations know the chants but not the frequencies. They know the instruments but not how to tune them. Eventually, they know only that their ancestors could move mountains, and they attribute it to divine intervention rather than lost science. In the archives of Istanbul, a map dated to 1513 presents another impossibility. The Piri Reis map, created by Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, shows the coastline of South America with remarkable accuracy. It also shows Antarctica, depicted not as we know it today, covered in ice, but with coastlines visible, as it might have appeared thousands of years ago before glaciation. The map's source materials, according to Piri Reis's own notes, included charts from the time of Alexander the Great and even older maps from the Library of Alexandria. How did ancient cartographers know the shape of Antarctica's coast beneath the ice? Modern surveys using ground-penetrating radar have confirmed the accuracy of the Piri Reis map's depiction. The bays, the rivers, the mountains all align with what lies under Antarctic ice sheets thousands of meters thick. This ice has been in place for at least 6,000 years, according to mainstream geology. So how did anyone map the continent before then? The implications are staggering. Either there was a civilization with advanced surveying capabilities over 6,000 years ago, or the ice sheet is younger than we believe, or the map is an impossible coincidence. Orthodox historians favor coincidence, suggesting the map's accuracy is exaggerated or misinterpreted. But the mathematical precision of the map's projections argues otherwise. The Piri Reis map uses spherical trigonometry, calculating positions as if viewed from space. This level of cartographic sophistication would not appear in the West until the 18th century. Yet here it is, in a 16th century map copied from sources far older. Other ancient maps show similar anomalies. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531 shows Antarctica centered on the South Pole, with rivers and mountains. The Bwatch map of 1737, based on older sources, shows Antarctica as two large islands, which modern surveys confirm is accurate beneath the ice. These maps suggest a lost civilization that possessed advanced navigational and surveying technology. Ships capable of reaching Antarctica. Instruments capable of measuring longitude accurately, something European navigators could not do until the invention of the chronometer in the 18th century. Methods of projecting spherical data onto flat surfaces. All of this knowledge existed once, was used to create maps of the entire world, and then was lost. The maps were copied and recopied, each generation introducing errors and stylizations, until their origin was forgotten and their accuracy dismissed. Imagine a fleet of ships setting out from an unknown port in the distant past. They carry instruments of bronze and crystal, devices that measure position by the stars, by the sun's angle, by magnetic fields. Over years, they chart the entire world, every coast, every island. They map Antarctica in a temperate period, or they map it with such precision they can see through ice to the rock beneath. The maps return to a great library, perhaps in Atlantis, perhaps in a city now beneath the sea. They are stored, studied, copied. But then catastrophe strikes. The city floods or burns. The library is destroyed. A few maps are saved, carried by refugees to new lands. These survivors do not have the ships or instruments to create new maps. They can only preserve the old ones, copying them imperfectly, not understanding the mathematics behind them. Centuries pass. The maps are copied again. They become curiosities, their accuracy unrecognized because no one has the means to verify them. Until finally, in the 16th century, a Turkish admiral compiles ancient sources into a new map, and the knowledge, fragmentary and distorted, re-emerges. At the British Museum, skulls carved from single blocks of crystal have puzzled researchers since their discovery. The most famous, the Mitchell-Hedges skull found in Belize in the 1920s, is carved with such precision that no tool marks are visible. The crystal's optical properties are extraordinary, perfectly aligned with the skull's axis. Hewlett-Packard Laboratories examined it in 1970 and concluded it should not exist. Crystal this pure fractures easily. Carving it without power tools should be impossible. Yet there it is, flawless. The skull shows no evidence of metal tool use. Under microscopic examination, the surface appears polished by hand, but the time required would be hundreds of years of continuous work. Other crystal skulls exist in museums worldwide, each carved with similar precision, each without explanation for their creation. Some show piezoelectric properties, generating small electrical charges when heated or compressed. Others focus and amplify light in unusual ways. A few produce subtle acoustic effects when exposed to certain frequencies. Were these objects technological devices? Computers of a sort, storing information in crystal lattice structures. Medical instruments using crystal's electrical properties to heal or diagnose. Religious artifacts designed to impress through their perfection. We cannot know. But the technology required to create them exceeds what we attribute to pre-Columbian civilizations. Diamond-tipped tools or perhaps laser-like devices capable of cutting crystal without shattering it. Polishing techniques that work at the molecular level. Understanding of crystal structure and optical properties. All of this would have been necessary. And all of it is absent from the archaeological record, existing only in the finished products that sit in museum cases, silent witnesses to capabilities we cannot explain. Imagine a workshop in an ancient city. A master craftsman works with crystal, not by grinding or sawing but by using sound to cut, focusing acoustic energy into beams that separate molecular bonds. Or perhaps a device that generates heat so precisely it can melt crystal along predetermined lines, then anneal it instantly to prevent fracturing. The skull takes shape over months of careful work. When finished, it is not merely decorative but functional, a tool for focusing energy, for storing information, for purposes we can only guess at. But the master craftsman trains no apprentice. The technique is secret, guarded by a priesthood or guild. When he dies, the knowledge dies with him. The skulls remain, but no new ones are created. Future generations marvel at them, attribute them to gods or aliens, never imagining they were made by humans with technology now lost. The Book of Enoch, excluded from most biblical canons but preserved in Ethiopian Christianity, contains technological descriptions that startle modern readers. Enoch is taken up by angels, shown the workings of heaven, and given knowledge of the Watchers, fallen angels who descended to earth and taught forbidden arts to humanity. Among these arts, metallurgy, weapon-making, cosmetics, sorcery, and astrology. But also specific technologies. The text describes the Watchers descending in fiery vehicles, teaching humans to smelt metal and forge weapons, showing them the secrets of the clouds and the signs of the earth. The Watchers breed with human women, producing the Nephilim, giants of great strength and knowledge. These hybrids build cities and monuments, ruling over humanity until God sends the flood to cleanse the earth of their corruption. The technological interpretation is clear. Advanced beings arrived with vehicles capable of flight, with knowledge of advanced metallurgy and engineering. They shared this knowledge with humans, perhaps too rapidly, without ensuring wisdom to match the power. The result was catastrophe, a technological civilization that turned to warfare and destruction, ending only when a cataclysm reset everything. The Book of Enoch's detailed descriptions of astronomical phenomena suggest the Watchers taught sophisticated star knowledge. Enoch is shown the chambers of the winds, the storehouses of snow and hail, the mechanisms of thunder and lightning. He is taught the movements of sun and moon with mathematical precision. This knowledge, the text says, was written in tablets and given to humanity. But after the flood, most of it was lost, surviving only in fragments. The parallels to the Sumerian king list are striking. Beings descend from heaven. They establish civilization, teach arts and sciences. They breed with humans. They rule for vast periods. Then comes a flood, and everything changes. Different cultures, different names, but the same story. Were the Watchers the same as the Anunnaki? Were the Nephilim the same as the antediluvian kings? The technologies match. Flying vehicles. Advanced weapons. Long lifespans. Astronomical knowledge. Metallurgy beyond what primitive humans should possess. All of it described in texts that mainstream scholars read as mythology but that followers of ancient technology theories read as eyewitness accounts written by people who did not have the vocabulary to describe what they saw. Imagine a village in the ancient world. The sky opens with light and sound. A vehicle descends, gleaming like metal, roaring like thunder. Beings emerge, taller than men, radiant, carrying objects that shine with inner light. They speak, and their words are understood though the language is strange. They teach the villagers to smelt copper, to make bronze, to forge tools and weapons far superior to stone. They show the night sky and explain the movements of stars with precision that takes generations to understand fully. They build structures using techniques the villagers cannot grasp, moving stones that should be immovable, creating buildings that align perfectly with celestial events. To the villagers, these beings are gods, angels, watchers. Their technology is magic, divine power. The villagers learn what they can, but much is beyond them. They imitate without fully understanding. When the watchers leave or die, the villagers are left with tools they can use but not replicate, knowledge they can apply but not extend. Within generations, the technology begins to fail. Within centuries, it becomes legend. The prophet Ezekiel, writing in the 6th century BCE, describes a vision that has puzzled theologians and fascinated engineers. A whirlwind comes from the north, a great cloud with fire flashing, surrounded by brilliant light. Within the fire, 4 living creatures appear, each with 4 faces and 4 wings. Beside each creature is a wheel, and the wheels move in any direction without turning. Above them is a platform like crystal, and above that a throne with a figure of human appearance, glowing like metal in fire. Orthodox interpretation treats this as purely symbolic, a vision of God's glory expressed in apocalyptic imagery. But reading it as a witness account of a technological encounter produces a different interpretation. A vehicle approaches, propelled by something that looks like fire, surrounded by a cloud that might be exhaust or displaced air. The vehicle has a brilliant light source, illuminating the area. It contains 4 beings wearing suits or equipment that make them appear non-human, with reflective visors, respirators, or helmets that resemble multiple faces. The vehicle has landing gear or wheels capable of omnidirectional movement, a technology we call holonomic drive, which exists today in advanced robotics. Above the beings is a transparent platform, perhaps the lower hull of the craft visible from beneath. Above that, a command chamber with an occupant that appears humanoid but is surrounded by glowing equipment. Ezekiel describes the sound as like rushing water or the voice of the Almighty, which matches descriptions of jet engines or powerful generators. He is taken aboard the craft, shown visions, given measurements for a future temple with precise specifications that read like architectural blueprints. When the encounter ends, the wheels lift up, the craft rises vertically, and the entire structure departs into the sky. NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich was so skeptical of the technological interpretation that he set out to debunk it. Instead, after analyzing Ezekiel's description using engineering principles, he concluded it described a functional spacecraft. He wrote The Spaceships of Ezekiel, detailing how the biblical account matched what such a craft would look like to a pre-technological observer. Blumrich even designed a wheel mechanism based on Ezekiel's description and patented it, as it offered advantages for omnidirectional movement. If Ezekiel saw a spacecraft, who built it? The Watchers, still operating in reduced capacity. A remnant of an ancient human civilization with advanced technology. Extraterrestrials maintaining contact with Earth. The text does not specify, calling the figure on the throne the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, ambiguous enough to fit multiple interpretations. What matters for our investigation is that the description fits a technological device, described in the only vocabulary available to a 6th century BCE witness. A device that flew, that moved with precision, that carried beings of great knowledge. A device that, like all the others, vanished from history, leaving only the account that later generations would read as religious allegory rather than encounter documentation. Imagine being Ezekiel, a priest in exile, standing by the Kebar River when the sky erupts with light. Terror and awe grip you as something vast descends. You describe what you see using the only references you have: living creatures, wheels, crystal, fire, metal. You cannot say spacecraft, hologram, engine, because these words do not exist. When you are taken aboard, shown things you cannot comprehend, you describe them as visions, as divine revelation. You write it all down, hoping future generations will understand. But they do not. They read your words as mysticism, as theology. The technology you tried to document becomes metaphor. The encounter becomes myth. In the ancient Sanskrit epic Mahabharata, warfare reaches apocalyptic scales. The Kurukshetra war, fought between related royal families, escalates until weapons of mass destruction are deployed. The descriptions are chilling in their specificity. The Brahmastra, a weapon described as containing the power of the universe, is released. It creates a terrible blast of light, brighter than 1,000 suns. A mushroom cloud rises. Those caught in the blast are burned beyond recognition, their skin and hair falling off. Survivors suffer from nausea and weakness. Food and water become contaminated. The land becomes barren. The text describes warriors washing themselves and their equipment in rivers to cleanse contamination. It describes a projectile charged with the power of the universe, producing heat that made the world feverish, causing elephants and other animals to run mad with fear. These descriptions match, in disturbing detail, nuclear weapon effects. The initial flash, brighter than the sun. The mushroom cloud. Radiation sickness causing hair loss and weakness. Radioactive contamination of food and water. Decontamination attempts through washing. The ecological devastation. How could a text written thousands of years ago describe nuclear warfare? Orthodox scholars dismiss the similarities as coincidence, the natural language of describing any large explosion. But the specificity argues otherwise. The Mahabharata describes multiple types of advanced weapons. The Agneya, a fire weapon. The Varunastra, which creates downpours and floods. The Vayavustra, which generates powerful winds. Each has specific effects, specific countermeasures, specific protocols for use. This reads less like mythology and more like a military manual for weapons systems. Archaeological evidence provides unsettling support. At Mohenjo-Daro and other Indus Valley sites, areas of rock and sand have been vitrified, melted into glass. This requires temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius, sustained over significant areas. Lightning can vitrify sand, but only in small tubes where the bolt strikes. The vitrification at these sites covers much larger areas, suggesting intense heat from above or at ground level. Similar vitrified areas exist in Scotland, in Turkey, in the Middle East, always at ancient sites, always unexplained. In ancient ruins from India to Ireland, stone fortifications show evidence of exposure to extreme heat. Vitrified forts, they're called, their stones melted and fused together. Conventional warfare, even at its most intense, does not generate temperatures sufficient to melt stone. Forest fires do not reach these temperatures. Only volcanic activity, lightning, or advanced weapons can vitrify rock on this scale. Were these sites hit by ancient nuclear weapons or something similar? Were the Brahmastra and other weapons described in the Mahabharata real devices, preserved in epic poetry long after the technology to build them was lost? If so, we face the troubling conclusion that ancient humanity possessed weapons of mass destruction and used them, possibly contributing to the collapse of their own civilization. Imagine the moment when the decision is made. A kingdom faces defeat. Its priests or generals activate a weapon preserved from the old times, from the age when gods walked the earth. Perhaps they do not fully understand what it will do. They aim it at the enemy army and unleash it. The explosion exceeds their worst fears. The blast, the heat, the cloud rising to the heavens. Victory turns to horror as they realize what they have done. The enemy is destroyed, but so is the land. So is the future. Survivors flee, carrying stories of divine wrath, of weapons that should never be used. The devices are sealed away, hidden, destroyed. Future generations remember only that their ancestors possessed power beyond imagining, power that brought catastrophe. The memory becomes myth, the technology becomes legend, and humanity forgets it once waged nuclear war until the 20th century, when we reinvented the weapons and confirmed that yes, they create mushroom clouds, yes, they cause radiation sickness, yes, they vitrify sand into glass. In 48 BCE, a catastrophe struck the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of knowledge in antiquity, burned. Estimates suggest it contained between 400,000 and 1 million scrolls and texts, accumulated over centuries from across the known world. Works of science, mathematics, astronomy, engineering, medicine, philosophy, history. Much of it existed nowhere else. The fire did not consume the entire library at once. It burned in stages, during various conflicts and accidents over several centuries. But the damage was cumulative and catastrophic. By the time the library finally ceased to function in the 4th or 5th century CE, most of its contents were lost forever. We know what vanished only from references in surviving texts. Archimedes wrote of war machines so advanced they could set ships on fire from a distance, using mirrors to focus sunlight. Those detailed plans were in Alexandria. Hipparchus created star catalogs and developed trigonometry. His complete works were there. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy and mapped the known world. His maps burned. Heron of Alexandria designed steam engines, automatic doors, programmable machines. His complete treatises were lost. Only fragments survive, tantalizing hints of sophisticated mechanical engineering. Ctesibius invented the force pump, the hydraulic organ, precise water clocks. His works were reduced to scattered references in later texts. How much technology was lost in Alexandria's flames? How many inventions, how many scientific principles, how many engineering techniques? We rebuild knowledge painfully, rediscovering over centuries what the ancients knew and we lost. The steam engine, reinvented in the 18th century, existed in primitive form in Alexandria. Automata, developed in the Renaissance, were created by Heron. Astronomical calculators like the Antikythera mechanism, whose operating principles we only recently understood, were likely documented in scrolls that burned. The tragedy is not just what was lost but what might have been. If the knowledge preserved in Alexandria had survived and spread, would the Middle Ages have been an age of enlightenment instead of darkness? Would we have reached our current technological level centuries earlier? Would we have avoided the need to rediscover so much, instead building continuously on ancient foundations? Some conspiracy theories suggest not all of Alexandria's knowledge was lost. They propose that select texts were saved, hidden away by secret societies, preserved in underground vaults or remote monasteries. These hidden libraries supposedly contain the technological secrets of the ancients, guarded by initiates who slowly release knowledge to humanity when deemed ready. Evidence for such hidden repositories is circumstantial at best. But the idea persists because the loss is so profound that we want to believe something survived. Imagine the library burning. Scholars run through smoke-filled halls, grabbing what scrolls they can carry. Some escape. Most do not. In the chaos, some texts are saved, hidden, carried away to safer locations. But the majority burn. Centuries of accumulated knowledge, the collected wisdom of dozens of civilizations, reduced to ash in days. The survivors are left with fragments. They remember that the lost texts contained wonders, but they cannot reconstruct them from memory. They write down what they recall, but it is incomplete, corrupted. Future generations inherit only shadows of the knowledge that once existed, and they struggle for centuries to rediscover what was lost in the fire. In medieval Europe, technology that seems impossible for its time appears in manuscripts and legends. Automata, mechanical figures capable of movement and even apparent speech, were created by skilled craftsmen. The Knights Templar and other orders were rumored to possess such devices. Pope Sylvester II, who served around 1000 CE, reportedly owned a bronze head that could answer questions, though whether it was mechanical or mystical depends on the source. Roger Bacon, the 13th-century philosopher, described devices that sound like submarines, flying machines, and motorized vehicles. He wrote of them as future possibilities, but some historians suggest he was describing devices that already existed in secret workshops or had existed in antiquity and were being recreated. Leonardo da Vinci, in the 15th century, designed helicopters, tanks, parachutes, diving suits, and numerous automata. Many assumed these were purely theoretical, centuries ahead of their time. But Leonardo had access to ancient texts recently recovered from the Byzantine Empire. Was he inventing or reinventing? Were his designs original or reconstructions of ancient technology he found described in salvaged manuscripts? Greek fire, the secret weapon of the Byzantine Empire, burned on water and could not be extinguished by conventional means. Used in naval warfare from the 7th to 13th centuries, it was sprayed from tubes mounted on ships, igniting enemy vessels in unstoppable conflagrations. The formula was so secret that it was lost when the Byzantine Empire fell. Modern attempts to recreate Greek fire produce approximations, but the exact composition remains unknown. Chemical analysis of residues suggests it involved petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, and naphtha, possibly combined in specific proportions with other ingredients. But something else was required, some process or additional component that gave it properties beyond simple incendiary mixtures. Damascus steel, forged in the Middle East from around 1100 to 1700 CE, was renowned for its strength, flexibility, and distinctive watery or wavy pattern. Swords made from Damascus steel could cut through European blades and remain sharp through extended use. The forging technique involved specific ores, precise temperatures, and methods passed down through generations of smiths. When the ore sources were exhausted and the master smiths died without fully training successors, the knowledge was lost. Modern metallurgists have analyzed Damascus steel and identified carbon nanotubes and carbide nanowires in its structure, giving it properties similar to modern composite materials. But recreating the forging process remains elusive. The ancients achieved nanotechnology through empirical methods, without understanding the science behind it. They knew what worked, even if they didn't know why. When the tradition broke, the technology vanished. Roman concrete, used in structures like the Pantheon and aqueducts, has outlasted modern concrete by centuries. 2,000-year-old Roman harbors still stand, their concrete hard and intact despite constant exposure to seawater. Modern concrete in similar conditions deteriorates within decades. The Roman formula included volcanic ash, lime, and seawater, mixed in specific proportions. Recent analysis reveals the concrete contains a rare mineral, aluminum tobermarite, which forms through chemical reactions between the ingredients and actually strengthens the concrete over time, especially in marine environments. The Romans understood this empirically, if not scientifically. They knew their concrete worked, even if they couldn't explain the chemical processes. When the Roman Empire fell and large-scale engineering projects ceased, the need for such concrete disappeared. The formula was lost, surviving only in the structures themselves. Only in the 21st century have we rediscovered why Roman concrete is superior and begun attempting to recreate it. Each of these technologies, from Greek fire to Damascus steel to Roman concrete, represents knowledge that existed, was used effectively, and then vanished. The loss was not always catastrophic, not always from invasion or fire. Sometimes it was economic. Sometimes social. Sometimes simply the failure to pass knowledge from master to apprentice before the master died. The result is the same. We stand among ruins built with techniques we cannot replicate, holding artifacts made with processes we cannot recreate, reading descriptions of devices we cannot rebuild. Imagine a master smith in Damascus, growing old, his hands less steady than before. He has apprentices, but none show the dedication required to learn the deepest secrets of the steel. He tells himself he will teach them next year, when they are ready. But next year he is ill. The year after, he dies. The apprentices know the basics but not the crucial details, the precise temperatures, the specific timing, the secret ingredients that make Damascus steel superior. They produce good blades, but not great ones. Their students produce adequate blades. Within generations, the art is lost, surviving only in the legendary swords of earlier eras that can cut through armor and never dull. Around the world, in temples and megalithic sites, researchers have discovered unusual acoustic properties. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the stone pillars resonate at specific frequencies when struck. In Malta, the hypogeum of Halsaflini contains a chamber where sounds at 110 to 111 Hz resonate so powerfully they can be felt throughout the body. In Egyptian temples, certain chambers amplify sound in unusual ways, focusing it at specific points or creating echo patterns that seem designed rather than accidental. At Chichen Itza, clapping in front of the main pyramid produces an echo that sounds like the call of the quetzal bird, sacred to the Maya. At Newgrange in Ireland, the burial chamber's acoustics create resonance at frequencies that induce altered states of consciousness. These are not accidents. The builders understood acoustics, designed structures to produce specific sonic effects. Why? Some researchers propose that sound was used in ancient technology. Specific frequencies could induce trance states, making worshippers more receptive to religious experiences. Sound could be used therapeutically, with different frequencies treating different ailments. Certain tones might have facilitated the altered states necessary for shamanic or mystical practices. Others suggest more direct technological applications. Sound for moving stones through acoustic levitation. Resonance for generating electrical charges through piezoelectric effects in stone. Focused sound waves as weapons or tools, capable of shattering objects or affecting human consciousness. The temples and megaliths might have been, in part, machines that used sound as their primary mechanism. Modern experiments support some of these ideas. Sound at specific frequencies can levitate small objects. Focused ultrasound can heat or even destroy tissue without touching it. Infrasound, below the range of human hearing, can cause anxiety, fear, or disorientation. If the ancients understood these principles, they could have built structures that harnessed sound for multiple purposes. But that understanding is lost. We know the temples resonate. We can measure the frequencies. But we don't know the full range of how they were used, what rituals or technologies employed these acoustic properties, or how the builders gained such sophisticated understanding of sonic phenomena. Imagine a ceremony in an ancient temple. The chamber is dark except for flickering lamps. Priests begin to chant, their voices tuned to the resonant frequency of the room. The sound builds, reverberating from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The vibrations are felt in the chest, in the bones. The frequency, carefully chosen, induces a trance state in the worshippers, opening their minds to visions or revelations. At the same time, the resonance generates small electrical charges in the stone, causing faint glows in specific minerals, enhancing the mystical atmosphere. This is not mere ritual. It is technology, sophisticated and effective, achieved through understanding that seems like magic to those who don't comprehend the principles. But the knowledge is fragile. It requires precise measurements, specific materials, exact frequencies. When the priesthood is destroyed, when the temples are abandoned, the technology becomes myth. Future generations stand in the same chambers, hear the same resonances, but do not understand their purpose. They attribute the effects to supernatural forces rather than acoustic engineering. In the 20th century, a Canadian inventor named John Hutchison claimed to have discovered an effect that defied conventional physics. While experimenting with high-voltage equipment and electromagnetic fields, objects in his laboratory reportedly began behaving strangely. Metal bars bent without being touched. Objects levitated. Materials changed properties. Some items showed evidence of transmutation, one element apparently changing into another. The Hutchison effect, as it became known, was filmed and witnessed by various observers, but it could not be reliably reproduced. Hutchison himself claimed he could not always recreate the conditions that produced the effect. Skeptics dismissed it as fraud or experimental error. Believers saw it as evidence of a new form of physics, perhaps relating to zero-point energy or other frontier concepts. What if the Hutchison effect, real or not, echoes ancient technology? What if the ancients discovered that combining specific electromagnetic fields, resonant frequencies, and material properties could produce effects that seem impossible? Levitation without direct contact. Transmutation of materials. Energy generation from seemingly empty space. The structures they built, with their precise alignments, their specific materials, their acoustic properties, might have been designed to produce these effects. Pyramids with granite chambers containing quartz crystals. Megaliths positioned on telluric energy lines. Temples oriented to celestial bodies at specific times of year. All of these could be components of a technological system that used principles we're only beginning to glimpse. The Ark of the Covenant, with its specific materials and construction, might have been a device for harnessing such forces. The Dendera reliefs might show not just light bulbs but plasma tubes utilizing these principles. The Vimanas might have flown using electromagnetic propulsion based on this technology. And all of it was lost when the civilizations that understood it fell, leaving only artifacts and structures we cannot fully explain. Imagine researchers in ancient Egypt, not priests following ritual but scientists experimenting. They discover that granite containing quartz, when subjected to pressure or vibration, generates electrical charge. They learn that arranging such stones in specific geometries amplifies the effect. They find that combining electrical fields with sound at certain frequencies produces anomalous effects, heating, light, levitation. They build structures to harness these forces, creating what appears to be magic but is actually advanced technology based on principles our modern science has not yet fully developed. Then the knowledge is lost. Future generations inherit the structures but not the understanding. They use them as tombs, as temples, as monuments, never knowing these buildings were once functioning machines. In the legends of Atlantis, preserved by Plato and embellished by countless later sources, technology plays a central role. The Atlanteans, according to these accounts, possessed crystals that generated immense power. They had flying vehicles and submarine vessels. They mined precious metals using advanced techniques. They built with precision that surpassed even Egypt or Peru. Their civilization reached heights of technological achievement unmatched before or since. And then, in a single day and night, Atlantis sank beneath the waves, taking all its knowledge with it. Plato's account, derived from Egyptian sources according to his telling, places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in the Atlantic Ocean. He describes it as larger than Libya and Asia combined, a powerful empire that waged war against ancient Athens around 9600 BCE, over 9,000 years before his own time. Modern scholars dismiss Atlantis as allegory, a philosophical device Plato used to illustrate political points. But the specificity of the account troubles this interpretation. The date, the location, the descriptions of geography and technology, all suggest Plato was working from source material, not pure invention. Egyptian priests told Solon, who told it to Plato's ancestor, who passed it down. If Atlantis existed and possessed advanced technology, its destruction would explain much. The sudden loss of a technological civilization could account for the regression that followed, the dark ages before civilization re-emerged in Sumer and Egypt. The survivors, fleeing the cataclysm, would have carried fragments of knowledge to different shores, explaining why similar technologies and architectural techniques appear in widely separated cultures. The crystal technology attributed to Atlantis appears in other legends as well. Edgar Cayce, the 20th century psychic, described Atlantean power crystals in his trance readings, claiming they were so powerful that their misuse contributed to the continent's destruction. He spoke of a hall of records hidden beneath the Sphinx, containing Atlantean knowledge preserved for future discovery. No such chamber has been found, though ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies beneath the Sphinx that might be voids or chambers. Crystal technology is not purely mythical. Modern technology uses crystals extensively. Quartz crystals in watches keep precise time through piezoelectric properties. Laser crystals generate coherent light. Silicon crystals form the basis of all computer processors. Crystals can store information, focus energy, and transform electromagnetic radiation. If the Atlanteans discovered these properties thousands of years ago, they could have built technology around crystal applications. Power generation through large crystal arrays. Information storage in crystal matrices. Energy weapons using focused crystal lasers. Communications devices using crystal resonators. All of this is theoretically possible with sufficient understanding of crystal physics. And all of it would vanish beneath the ocean if the civilization that created it sank suddenly. Imagine Atlantis in its final days. The scientists realize the power crystals are becoming unstable, resonating at dangerous frequencies. They try to shut them down, but the process is too advanced. The crystals begin to overload, generating more power than the containment systems can handle. The energy bleeds into the earth, triggering earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. The island begins to break apart. In desperation, some Atlanteans load ships with scrolls, artifacts, seeds, and tools. They sail east and west, seeking safety. Behind them, their civilization disappears into the sea, taking its technology to the ocean floor where pressure and time will destroy most evidence. The survivors arrive in Egypt, in South America, in other lands. They try to rebuild, but they are too few, their knowledge too fragmented. They teach what they can to the local peoples, helping them build structures that echo Atlantean architecture. But the advanced technology cannot be recreated without the industrial base, the accumulated knowledge, the generations of research that produced it. Within lifetimes, the refugees die, and their descendants remember only that their ancestors came from a great land that sank, possessing knowledge now lost. The Tower of Babel, described in Genesis, presents another technological mystery. Humanity, speaking one language, comes together to build a tower reaching to heaven. God, seeing this, confounds their speech so they cannot understand each other, and the project is abandoned. The tower is never completed, and humanity scatters across the earth. The story is typically read as allegory about human pride and divine judgment. But examined as a technological account, different implications emerge. A massive construction project requiring coordination of thousands of workers. A structure intended to reach the heavens, suggesting either literal altitude or symbolic connection to celestial powers. A sudden termination of the project followed by dispersal of the population. Archaeological sites in Mesopotamia reveal ziggurats, stepped pyramids that match descriptions of the Tower of Babel. The largest, the Edamananke in Babylon, stood approximately 91 meters tall, a massive structure by ancient standards. But why build such towers? Orthodox interpretations suggest religious purposes, temples to reach closer to the gods. Alternative theories propose more practical functions. Astronomical observatories, their height providing clear views of the sky. Communications towers, using their altitude for signal transmission. Power generators, their shape and position designed to collect and focus atmospheric electricity or telluric energy. The confusion of languages might represent not divine intervention but the result of bringing together workers from many regions, speaking different tongues, to build something beyond their understanding. When the project became too complex for effective coordination, it failed. Or perhaps the tower itself was a technological device whose activation went wrong, producing effects that disrupted communication, literally or metaphorically. Some researchers suggest the tower was an attempt to recreate antediluvian technology, knowledge preserved in fragments after the flood. If successful, it might have restored capabilities humanity had lost. Its failure and the subsequent scattering could represent the final loss of unified technological knowledge, the moment when fragments of ancient science dispersed beyond recovery. Imagine the construction site. A massive ziggurat rising from the plain. Workers from dozens of cultures labor together, guided by engineers who possess ancient texts describing how the gods built structures that touch the sky. They're attempting to recreate something they don't fully understand, following instructions from a lost age. As the tower nears completion, they prepare to activate it, to channel power or open communication with the heavens. But something goes wrong. Perhaps the device malfunctions, producing electromagnetic effects that disorient the workers. Perhaps political tensions among the different groups explode into conflict. Perhaps the realization that they're meddling with forces beyond their comprehension triggers panic. For whatever reason, the project collapses. The workers scatter, taking their languages and their fragments of knowledge to different lands. The tower is abandoned, incomplete, gradually eroded by time until only legends remain. Throughout history, mining operations reveal anomalies that suggest advanced ancient technology. In South Africa, gold mines extend to extraordinary depths, some reaching over 3 kilometers underground. Radiocarbon dating of organic material in these mines suggests they were active over 100,000 years ago, long before modern humans supposedly possessed mining technology. The precision and extent of the mining operations imply not casual exploitation but organized industry. In Peru, ancient mines show evidence of sophisticated extraction techniques. Tunnels follow ore veins with precision that suggests advanced surveying. Ventilation shafts provide air circulation deep underground. Support structures prevent collapse using engineering principles not attributed to pre-Columbian peoples. In various locations worldwide, mines contain tool marks and extraction patterns that are difficult to explain with primitive technology. Holes drilled into hard rock with precision and consistency. Shafts cut at precise angles. Evidence of ore processing on-site using methods we don't fully understand. Were the ancients mining for themselves, or were they mining for others? The Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki coming to Earth seeking gold, employing humans in the mines. The Enoch texts describe the Watchers teaching metallurgy and mining. If advanced beings required minerals from Earth, they might have established mining operations far more extensive than we imagine, teaching humans the techniques and employing them in the extraction. When the beings departed, the mines were abandoned. Later humans might have reopened and worked some of them, but without the technology to reach the deepest levels or process the ore as efficiently. The knowledge faded, but the mines remained, their true age and extent gradually forgotten. Imagine a mining complex in deep antiquity. Humans work under the direction of taller beings with advanced tools. The beings use devices that cut through rock as if it were soft wood. Lights that glow without flame illuminate the tunnels. Ventilation systems powered by mechanisms the human miners don't understand keep the air fresh even at great depths. The extracted ore is processed using chemical methods that separate precious metals with high efficiency. The operation continues for centuries, perhaps millennia. Then the beings leave. The humans continue working the mines with simpler tools, but they cannot maintain the advanced systems. Equipment breaks down and cannot be repaired. The deepest shafts become inaccessible. Within generations, the humans remember only that their ancestors mined for the gods, using magic to extract wealth from the earth. In South America, the precision of ancient stonework challenges all conventional explanations. At Sacsayhuaman, near Cusco, Peru, massive stones are fitted together so exactly that no mortar is needed and no blade can slip between them. Some stones have over 12 angles, each one precisely cut to fit against multiple neighbors. The stones weigh up to 200 tons, yet they are shaped and positioned with accuracy measured in fractions of millimeters. At Ollantaytambo, blocks show evidence of being sliced rather than chiseled. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, stones are cut with such precision and uniformity that they appear machine-made. Right angles are perfect. Surfaces are flat to within thousandths of an inch. Complex interlocking patterns suggest modular construction using standardized components. Orthodox archaeology attributes these accomplishments to patient labor with stone and bronze tools. But experiments attempting to replicate the precision have failed. Bronze cannot cut the andesite and granite used in these structures. Stone pounding produces rough surfaces, not the glass-smooth finishes observed. Moving 200-ton blocks up mountain slopes without wheels, draft animals, or advanced engineering seems impossible, yet it was done. Alternative theories propose lost technology. Tools capable of cutting stone as easily as we cut wood. Perhaps high-frequency sound that weakens molecular bonds. Perhaps chemical solutions that soften stone temporarily. Perhaps thermal devices that melt and reshape rock. Methods of moving massive weights through acoustic levitation, electromagnetic manipulation, or understanding of gravity we have not achieved. The Inca, who inherited these sites, told the Spanish conquistadors they did not build the oldest structures. Those, they said, were made by the gods or by earlier peoples with powers the Inca no longer possessed. The Inca could work stone skillfully, but their masonry, though impressive, does not match the precision of the ancient megalithic blocks. This suggests a lost civilization or outside intervention that possessed superior technology, knowledge that vanished before the Inca rose to power. Imagine the ancient builders at work. Not laborers straining with primitive tools but technicians operating sophisticated equipment. A device, perhaps handheld, perhaps larger, is applied to stone. The device emits sound beyond human hearing, or focused energy, or a field effect we cannot yet produce. The stone, exposed to this force, becomes temporarily malleable, soft enough to shape by hand or with simple tools. Once shaped, the field is removed, and the stone hardens again, retaining its new form with perfect surfaces and precise angles. Multiple stones are shaped this way, designed to fit together in complex patterns. They are positioned, perhaps floated into place using acoustic levitation or anti-gravity technology. Once in position, they lock together, their weight and precision creating structures that will stand for millennia. The builders work efficiently, completing in months what would take us years or decades. But they do not leave instruction manuals. They do not train successors. When their civilization ends, the technology ends with it, leaving only the structures as silent testimony to capabilities we cannot match. The Nazca lines in Peru present another enigma. Covering hundreds of square kilometers of desert, the lines form geometric patterns and enormous figures of animals, plants, and abstract designs. Some lines stretch for kilometers, perfectly straight. The figures are so large they can only be fully appreciated from the air, at altitudes of several hundred meters. Created by removing the darker surface rocks to reveal lighter ground beneath, the lines are attributed to the Nazca culture, which flourished from roughly 200 BCE to 600 CE. But their purpose remains debated. Were they astronomical calendars, aligning with solstices and star positions? Were they religious pathways, routes for processional rituals? Were they offerings to gods in the sky, meant to be seen from above? Or were they markers for something else entirely? The argument that they were meant to be seen from above raises an obvious question: how did the Nazca view them from the air? Orthodox archaeology suggests they didn't, that the lines had symbolic or ritual meaning that didn't require aerial viewing. But the precision of the lines, their scale, and their layout suggest an aerial perspective was involved in their creation. Alternative theories propose the Nazca had flight capability. Hot air balloons using textile and local materials could have provided aerial reconnaissance. Evidence of ancient burn pits and textile fragments with weaving patterns suitable for balloon construction have been found in the area. More radical theories suggest the lines served as runways or markers for actual flying craft, either built by the Nazca with lost technology or used by others who visited them. The figures might be identifiers, symbols visible from altitude indicating the location's purpose or identity. Some researchers note that the longest lines, when extended, point to other ancient sites, suggesting a network of connections across South America. If flying was possible in the ancient world, whether through hot air balloons, gliders, or more advanced craft, then creating massive ground markers makes practical sense. They would serve as navigational aids, identifying landing areas or sacred sites from the air. Imagine a pilot in an ancient flying machine, cruising over the Peruvian desert. Below, the Nazca lines appear, massive figures of a monkey, a spider, a hummingbird, each one a landmark identifying specific locations. The long straight lines point toward distant destinations, routes to follow to reach other important sites. The pilot adjusts course, following a line toward the horizon, knowing it leads to the next stop on the journey. On the ground, the Nazca people maintain the lines, clearing away rocks that have shifted, refreshing the boundaries. They do this not because they can see the full figures, they cannot from ground level, but because the flying gods have told them it is important, that these markers serve purposes beyond their understanding. When the flying machines stop coming, when the knowledge of flight is lost, the people continue to maintain some lines out of tradition, but gradually they forget why. The lines remain, preserved by the desert's dryness, waiting for future generations who will rediscover flight and finally see them as they were meant to be seen. In 1898, a wooden object was found in a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt, dated to approximately 200 BCE. Catalogued as a bird figurine and stored in a museum basement for decades, it was largely ignored until 1969 when Egyptologist Khalil Messiha examined it and noticed something unusual. The object, carved from sycamore wood, resembled a bird, but its proportions were wrong. The wings were too straight, too symmetrical. The tail was vertical, like a rudder, rather than horizontal like a bird's tail fan. When Messiha showed the object to aviation experts, they noted it resembled a glider. The wing shape, the dihedral angle, the tail rudder configuration, all matched principles of aerodynamics. Models were built based on the object's proportions, and they flew, gliding stably when launched. The Saqqara bird, as it became known, sparked debate. Was it a toy? A weather vane? Or a model of a flying machine? Other similar objects have been found in Egyptian and South American contexts, small carvings that resemble aircraft more than birds. Some show features that look like cockpits, engines, tail fins. Orthodox archaeologists maintain these are stylized birds or fish, religious symbols with no technological significance. But the aerodynamic properties are difficult to dismiss. Why would ancient craftsmen create bird sculptures with the precise proportions necessary for flight unless they understood aerodynamics? The possibility that the Saqqara bird represents a scale model of a functional glider implies the Egyptians experimented with flight. Perhaps they built full-size gliders, launching from cliffs or pyramids. Perhaps they understood lift and drag, even if they lacked engines for powered flight. Or perhaps the model represents something more advanced, a memory of actual flying machines from an earlier era, preserved in miniature by craftsmen who no longer understood its full significance. Imagine an Egyptian workshop where engineers design gliders. They carve small models from wood, testing different wing shapes and tail configurations. They launch the models from high places, observing which designs fly best. Through experimentation, they develop efficient gliding craft. Perhaps priests use them in ceremonies, launching from pyramid tops to appear as gods descending from heaven. Perhaps they serve practical purposes, reconnaissance or communication between distant points. The technology is limited, gliders without engines can only descend, but it proves the principle of flight is understood. Then the knowledge fades. Perhaps the priests who understood flight die without successors. Perhaps political changes make such displays dangerous or unnecessary. The full-size gliders decay or are destroyed. Only small models remain, stored in tombs, their purpose forgotten, until modern eyes see them and recognize the aerodynamic principles they embody. In Delhi, India, stands a pillar that defies conventional metallurgy. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, erected approximately 1,600 years ago, stands over 7 meters tall and weighs more than 6 tons. It is made of 98% pure wrought iron, and despite standing exposed to weather for over a millennium and a half, it shows no signs of rust. Modern iron, even with protective coatings, corrodes within years when exposed to elements. Yet this ancient pillar remains pristine, its surface smooth and uncorroded. Metallurgical analysis reveals the pillar contains high levels of phosphorus, which creates a thin protective layer of mesoidite on the surface. This layer prevents oxygen and water from reaching the iron beneath, protecting it from corrosion. But creating such a pillar presents enormous challenges. Forging over 6 tons of wrought iron to 98% purity requires temperatures and techniques that seem beyond ancient capabilities. The iron must be hammered repeatedly, folding and refolding to remove impurities, a process that would require massive forges, fuel, and coordinated labor. Modern attempts to replicate the pillar's metallurgy have succeeded in small samples but not at scale. The phosphorus content must be carefully controlled, enough to create protection but not so much as to make the iron brittle. The forging must be uniform throughout the massive piece. Achieving this 1,600 years ago suggests metallurgical knowledge far advanced for the era. Was this knowledge indigenous, developed through generations of Indian smiths perfecting their craft? Or was it inherited from an earlier tradition, perhaps from the same sources that produced Damascus steel and other lost metallurgical techniques? The inscription on the pillar credits King Chandragupta II, but it does not explain how it was made. That knowledge, like so many others, has vanished, leaving only the artifact. Imagine the forge where the pillar was created. Massive bellows, perhaps powered by water wheels or teams of workers, feed air to fires hot enough to work iron on this scale. Master smiths direct teams of hammerers, coordinating the folding and welding of iron blooms into a single coherent mass. The phosphorus content is controlled through careful selection of ore sources and additions during the process. After days or weeks of continuous work, the pillar is complete, a single piece of iron taller than any man, purer than what most modern techniques can achieve. It is transported to Delhi and erected. The smiths who created it train apprentices, but over generations, the exact techniques blur. The massive forges fall into disuse. Smaller projects don't require such scale or purity. Eventually, no one remembers precisely how it was done. The pillar stands as a monument not just to a king but to lost metallurgical knowledge, a silent challenge to modern engineers who cannot match what ancients achieved. In ancient China, the Han Dynasty polymath Zhang Heng invented a device in 132 CE that detected earthquakes from hundreds of kilometers away. The seismoscope, as modern scholars call it, consisted of a bronze vessel with 8 dragon heads arranged around the outside, each holding a bronze ball in its mouth. Below each dragon was a bronze toad with open mouth. When an earthquake occurred, even one too distant to be felt at the device's location, a mechanism inside would release the ball from the dragon facing the direction of the quake. The ball would fall into the toad's mouth, indicating both that an earthquake had occurred and its approximate direction. Historical records confirm the device worked. On one occasion, a ball dropped with no earthquake felt in the capital. Days later, messengers arrived reporting a major earthquake several hundred kilometers to the west, exactly the direction indicated by the seismoscope. How did it work? The original device was lost, and reconstructions based on historical descriptions vary. Most assume a pendulum mechanism, where seismic waves cause a suspended weight to swing, triggering the release mechanism in the corresponding direction. But achieving the sensitivity to detect distant earthquakes while avoiding false triggers from local vibrations, passing carts, or wind requires sophisticated engineering. Modern seismographs use electronics and calibration that weren't available in ancient China, yet Zhang Heng's device functioned effectively. This suggests an understanding of mechanical principles, of harmonic motion and dampening, that we might not fully appreciate. The device itself might have been more sophisticated than reconstructions assume. Perhaps it used liquid levels, magnetic fields, or other principles we haven't considered. The loss of the original means we're guessing at its mechanism, trying to reverse engineer a device we know worked but don't fully understand. Imagine Zhang Heng in his workshop, testing prototype after prototype. He observes how suspended weights respond to vibrations, how different suspension methods affect sensitivity and stability. Through experimentation, he arrives at a design that responds to the specific frequency patterns of distant earthquakes while ignoring other disturbances. The device is installed in the palace, a bronze wonder that proves his genius. When it accurately predicts a distant quake, his reputation is secured. But the device is complex, requiring precise construction and calibration. When Zhang Heng dies, no one fully understands the principles behind it. Later craftsmen attempt to maintain it, but without grasping the theory, they cannot repair it properly when it fails. Eventually it is lost, melted down perhaps, or simply abandoned when no one can keep it working. Future generations remember that Zhang Heng created a device that detected earthquakes, but the specifics of how vanish, another piece of lost technology. In ancient Greece and Rome, theatrical performances employed sophisticated mechanical effects. Automated theaters, described by Heron of Alexandria, used systems of ropes, weights, and gears to create moving scenery, automated actors, and special effects without human operators once the mechanism was started. Heron's treatise Automata describes a miniature automatic theater in detail. A wheeled platform contained an entire mechanical play. When released, the platform would roll forward, stop, and present a scene with moving figures. After the scene, doors would close, the platform would move again, and a second scene would appear with different action. All of this powered by a falling weight, using a system of gears and cams to control the timing and sequence of movements. Full-size theatrical mechanisms were even more impressive. Stage machinery could make gods appear to descend from above or rise from below. Scenery changed automatically between acts. Thunder and lightning effects were produced through mechanical means. All of this suggests a sophisticated understanding of mechanics, of gear ratios and timing mechanisms, that parallels the technology of the Antikythera mechanism. Yet these mechanical theaters were lost. The knowledge of how to build and operate them faded. Medieval and Renaissance theater had to reinvent special effects from scratch, without benefit of the advanced Greek and Roman techniques. Only with the rediscovery of ancient texts and the development of modern engineering did we begin to appreciate how sophisticated theatrical machinery once was. Why was this technology lost? Perhaps because it was expensive and specialized. Only large theaters in wealthy cities could afford elaborate mechanisms. When economic conditions declined, when theaters closed during political turmoil or religious changes, the machinery fell into disuse. The engineers who built and maintained it found other work or died. Within generations, the techniques were forgotten, surviving only in fragmentary descriptions that later readers couldn't fully interpret. Imagine a Roman theater in its glory days. The play reaches its climax, and the audience gasps as a god appears to descend from above, floating downward on a platform invisible beneath his robes. Machinery hidden in the theater's framework lowers him smoothly to the stage. Lightning flashes, created by polished metal sheets catching sunlight or lamplight. Thunder rumbles, produced by rolling bronze balls down wooden channels. The effect is stunning, seeming magical to the audience who don't see the mechanisms behind the walls and beneath the stage. But maintaining these systems requires skilled engineers. When the theater's funding declines, maintenance lapses. Mechanisms break and aren't repaired. Eventually, the theater closes entirely. The building falls into ruin, the machinery corrodes or is salvaged for metal, and the knowledge of how it all worked dissolves into legend. The Lycurgus cup, a Roman glass vessel from the 4th century CE, displays properties that seem impossible for ancient glassmaking. When lit from in front, the cup appears green. When lit from behind, it glows red. This dichroic property results from nanoparticles of gold and silver suspended in the glass, approximately 50 nanometers in diameter. The nanoparticles interact with light in ways that produce different colors depending on the light's direction, a phenomenon explained by modern physics but seemingly impossible for Roman craftsmen to create intentionally. Analysis reveals the gold and silver were not just mixed into the glass but were processed to achieve specific particle sizes. Modern nanotechnology deliberately creates such particles for use in sensors, optical devices, and medical applications. How did Romans achieve this 1,700 years ago? The orthodox explanation is that it was accidental. Roman glassmakers added gold and silver for color, and by chance, the proportions and heating process produced nanoparticles. The striking dichroic effect was a lucky accident. But the precision of the particle sizes and the uniformity of their distribution throughout the glass suggest more control than random chance would produce. Perhaps Roman glassmakers developed empirical techniques that achieved nanotechnology without understanding the nanoscale physics involved. Through trial and error, they learned that specific recipes and heating processes produced special effects. They couldn't explain why it worked in terms of nanoparticles, those concepts didn't exist, but they knew what worked. If this interpretation is correct, then Roman glassmaking was more sophisticated than generally recognized, achieving results we didn't match again until the 20th century. The knowledge would have been closely guarded, trade secrets of specific workshops. When those workshops closed, through economic decline or political change, the secrets died with the masters. Only a few artifacts like the Lycurgus cup survived, puzzling later generations who couldn't reproduce the effect. Imagine a Roman glass workshop where a master craftsman, through decades of experimentation, has perfected a technique for creating glasses that change color with light. He knows the exact proportions of gold and silver to add, the precise temperatures to maintain during different stages of production, the timing of cooling and reheating. He creates masterpieces, cups and vessels that seem to contain light itself. But his art is so difficult that even his best apprentices can't fully master it. When he dies, they try to continue his work, but their pieces lack the perfect properties. Gradually, the technique is simplified, then lost entirely. The remaining dichroic glasses become treasures, their method of creation a mystery that will take over 1,000 years to solve. Archaeological evidence of ancient medical practices reveals capabilities that challenge our assumptions about primitive medicine. Skulls found in Peru, France, and other locations show evidence of trepanation, surgical drilling or cutting into the skull, performed while the patient lived. More remarkably, many patients survived. Bone regrowth around the holes indicates healing, meaning the patients lived months or years after the surgery. Performing brain surgery with stone or bronze tools, without modern anesthesia or antiseptics, seems impossible. Yet it was done successfully often enough that it became an established practice. How did ancient surgeons manage this? They must have understood anatomy, knowing where they could cut without causing immediate death. They must have had methods for preventing infection, perhaps using honey, herbs, or other natural antibiotics. They must have had ways to control pain, either through drugs, alcohol, or techniques we don't recognize. Some skulls show multiple trepanations, meaning patients survived one surgery and returned for another. This suggests a level of medical success far higher than we'd expect from primitive conditions. Evidence of other advanced medical procedures appears globally. Cataract surgery in ancient India. Amputation with survival in ancient Egypt. Dental work including fillings in ancient America. Each of these requires not just courage but knowledge, techniques passed down through generations of practitioners. Much of this medical knowledge was lost during Dark Ages or cultural disruptions. Roman medicine, sophisticated and empirically based, largely vanished in Western Europe during the medieval period. Islamic physicians preserved some knowledge, and Eastern traditions maintained others, but much was lost entirely. When Renaissance physicians began dissecting cadavers and studying anatomy, they were often rediscovering what ancient doctors already knew. Imagine a surgeon in ancient Peru, preparing to perform trepanation. The patient, suffering from head trauma or seizures, lies on a table. The surgeon has trained for years in this procedure, learning from masters who learned from their masters. He has tools, sharp obsidian blades, and drills made from hard stone or metal. He has medicines, extracts from plants that reduce pain and prevent infection. He begins the surgery with confidence born of experience. The cut is precise, following techniques refined over generations. The section of skull is removed, relieving pressure or accessing the injury. The patient survives, the wound healing over weeks. But the knowledge is fragile. If this surgeon dies without training successors, if war or disease disrupts the medical tradition, the technique can vanish within a generation, leaving only the skulls with their healed holes as evidence that it once existed. In ancient texts, descriptions of electrical experimentation appear unexpectedly. The Greeks knew about static electricity, which they generated by rubbing amber with fur. The word electricity itself derives from elektron, the Greek word for amber. But was their knowledge limited to static sparks? Some ancient sources describe more sophisticated electrical phenomena. The Greek physician Scribonios Largus, in the 1st century CE, documented using electric torpedo fish to treat pain, an early form of electrotherapy. Patients would stand on a live torpedo fish, receiving electrical shocks through their feet, which reportedly helped with headaches and arthritis. This suggests understanding that electricity could affect the human body therapeutically, knowledge that would be lost and not rediscovered in the West until the 18th century. The Baghdad battery and similar devices imply electrochemical knowledge. If ancient peoples could generate electrical current, what else might they have done with it? Evidence is fragmentary, but tantalizing. Temple reliefs that look like light bulbs. Descriptions in texts of objects that glowed without fire. References to healing devices that might have used electrical stimulation. If ancient civilizations did experiment with electricity, the knowledge was not widespread and did not lead to the kind of electrical revolution we experienced in the 19th and 20th centuries. Perhaps the understanding was limited to specific priesthoods or guilds who kept it secret. Perhaps the practical applications were limited without the industrial base to create generators, motors, and transmission systems. Or perhaps there was more extensive use of electricity than we recognize, systems that functioned for centuries before being lost in catastrophes or gradual decline. Imagine a temple in ancient Egypt where priests understand that certain arrangements of metal and acidic solutions produce electrical current. They use this to create lights in inner sanctums, impressing pilgrims with illumination that doesn't flicker or smoke. They experiment with running current through different materials, discovering that some conduct while others resist. They find that electrical shocks can ease pain or stimulate muscles. But their knowledge is pragmatic, not theoretical. They know what works without understanding electron flow or electromagnetic fields. This limits how far they can develop the technology. When the priesthood is disrupted, when temples are destroyed or abandoned, the systems fall apart. No one can fix them because the theoretical understanding doesn't exist to troubleshoot and repair. The electrical technology vanishes, remembered only in cryptic references to divine light and healing powers that later generations interpret as purely supernatural. The Phaistos disc, discovered in 1908 in the Minoan palace of Phaistos on Crete, presents an enduring mystery. A fired clay disc approximately 15 centimeters in diameter, it is covered on both sides with symbols arranged in a spiral pattern. The symbols appear to have been stamped into the wet clay using movable type, making this potentially the world's earliest example of printing technology, predating Gutenberg by over 3,000 years. The disc dates to approximately 1700 BCE, the height of Minoan civilization. The symbols, 45 distinct types, depict people, animals, plants, and tools. They're arranged in groups separated by lines, suggesting they form words or concepts. But despite over a century of effort, no one has successfully deciphered the disc. Is it writing? If so, what language? Linear A, the Minoan script, remains undeciphered, so even if the disc uses a related language, we lack a key to unlock it. Is it a religious text, a calendar, a game, or something else entirely? Some researchers suggest the disc is a hoax, created in modern times and passed off as ancient. But thermoluminescence testing confirms its age, and its fine spot in archaeological context argues against fraud. The real mystery may be the movable type. If the Minoans developed printing technology 3,000 years before it revolutionized Europe, why didn't it spread and transform their civilization? Perhaps it was used only for special purposes, never developed into a general technology. Perhaps the knowledge was limited to a small group. Perhaps the disc represents an experimental technique that was abandoned. Or perhaps printing was more common than we think, used primarily on perishable materials that didn't survive, with the Phaistos disc being the rare example that survived because it was fired clay. If ancient Crete possessed printing technology, what else might they have had? The Minoan civilization showed advanced architecture, plumbing, and art. Perhaps they had other technologies recorded on printed materials that have since vanished. Imagine a Minoan workshop where craftsmen have created a set of stamps, each bearing a symbol. They press these into soft clay to create documents, far faster than carving each symbol individually. The technique allows mass production of texts, standardized documents that can be reproduced identically. But the technology requires literacy, standardization, and a use case that justifies the effort of creating stamps. Perhaps it was used for administrative documents, religious texts, or educational materials. But then Minoan civilization collapses, destroyed by earthquake, invasion, or volcanic eruption. The workshops burn. The stamps are lost or destroyed. The printed documents, if made on paper or wood, decompose. Only one clay disc survives, baked hard in the destruction that claimed everything else. Future generations find it and cannot read it, a message from the past in a code we cannot break. The Voynich manuscript, carbon dated to the early 15th century, is written in an unknown script and language, filled with illustrations of unidentifiable plants, astronomical charts, and human figures in strange contexts. Despite examination by the world's best cryptographers and linguists, it has never been deciphered. Some believe it's an elaborate hoax. Others think it's encoded using a cipher that has defeated all attempts to crack it. Still others propose it's written in an unknown language or uses a unique symbolic system. What if the Voynich manuscript preserves fragments of ancient knowledge and code? Encoded in ways we no longer understand. The plants illustrated don't match known species. Perhaps they're extinct plants, or perhaps they're symbolic representations of alchemical or pharmaceutical knowledge. The astronomical charts show patterns that don't match standard medieval cosmology. Perhaps they represent older knowledge, pre-Christian understandings of the heavens. The manuscript might be a copy of much older texts, translated and encoded by medieval scholars who had access to materials from ancient libraries. If the Library of Alexandria or other repositories preserved pre-flood knowledge, fragments might have circulated in the medieval world, copied and recopied, encoded to protect them from destruction by religious authorities who saw such knowledge as heretical. The Voynich manuscript could be one such encoded preservation, its cipher so effective that even its creator's key has been lost, leaving us with a text we can see but cannot read. Imagine a medieval scholar who has obtained ancient texts, perhaps from Byzantium, perhaps from Arab sources, that describe technologies and knowledge from ages past. He recognizes their value but knows they're dangerous. Claims of pre-Christian wisdom, descriptions of devices that sound magical, could bring accusations of heresy. So he encodes them, creating a cipher that protects the knowledge while preserving it. He illustrates the plants mentioned in the texts, draws the celestial diagrams described, copies the human figures that appear in the originals. He intends to create a key, to ensure the knowledge isn't lost. But death comes unexpectedly. The manuscript passes to others who don't have the key. They copy it, preserving what they don't understand. Eventually, it reaches us, a beautiful mystery that may contain ancient technology descriptions if only we could read them. As we draw this journey toward its close, the weight of evidence accumulates. The Antikythera mechanism with its impossible sophistication. The pyramids and megaliths that defy replication. The Baghdad battery and Dendera relief suggesting electrical knowledge. The Sanskrit descriptions of flying machines and devastating weapons. The precision stonework in South America. The maps that show lands they shouldn't. The crystal skulls carved with techniques we cannot match. The medical and metallurgical achievements beyond what we expect. Each piece, individually, might be dismissed. Coincidence, misinterpretation, exaggeration. But collectively, they form a pattern. A pattern that suggests our ancestors possessed knowledge and capabilities we've been taught they lacked. The evidence points to lost technology, to civilizations that rose higher than we imagined before falling into darkness. What are we to make of this pattern? Were these technologies developed independently by human genius, reaching heights through patient experimentation and accumulated knowledge? Or were they gifts, taught by visitors from the stars or from advanced civilizations we haven't yet discovered? The ancient texts consistently describe beings descending from above, teaching arts and sciences. The Sumerian Anunnaki. The Hebrew Watchers. The Greek Titans. The Hindu Devas. Different names, different cultures, but always the same theme: knowledge came from the sky. Perhaps these accounts preserve memory of actual contact, encounters with beings who possess technology beyond ancient comprehension. These beings taught what they could, shared what they chose, left behind artifacts and structures that would long outlast their presence. When they departed or died, humanity was left with fragments, pieces of a puzzle we could no longer complete. We used what we remembered, built what we could, but each generation lost a little more until finally only legends remained, stories of gods and magic that we dismissed as primitive superstition. Or perhaps the explanation is terrestrial but equally profound. Perhaps human civilization is far older than we believe. Perhaps we've risen and fallen before, built technological societies that left traces we misinterpret or don't recognize. Perhaps the survivors of ancient cataclysms, floods and earthquakes and climate shifts, carried fragments of knowledge to new lands, taught what they remembered, built echoes of what they'd lost. In this view, we're not the first technological civilization but perhaps the fourth or fifth, each one rising from the ruins of the last, each one losing more of what came before. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a cosmic catastrophe around 12,000 years ago, a comet or asteroid strike that triggered climate change, mass extinctions, and rising sea levels. If a civilization existed before this event, it would have been devastated. Its cities flooded as ice melted. Its population scattered or destroyed. Within centuries, nearly all evidence of its existence could vanish, leaving only the most durable monuments, massive stones, and deep foundations that couldn't be eroded away. From either perspective, terrestrial or extraterrestrial, the result is the same. We live among the ruins of something greater, something lost. The pyramids stand as silent witnesses. The megaliths challenge our explanations. The artifacts in museums whisper that history is incomplete, that the story we've been told is wrong, that our ancestors were not primitive but sophisticated, not ignorant but knowledgeable, not lucky but skillful. The technology was real. The Antikythera mechanism computed the cosmos. The Baghdad battery generated current. The pyramids harnessed energies we're only beginning to understand. The Vimanas flew, if not in reality then at least in detailed plans recorded by people who believed they were real. The Brahmastra destroyed cities with heat and radiation. The acoustic properties of temples moved stones and altered consciousness. All of this existed, functioned, served purposes we can only guess at now. And then it ended. Through catastrophe or gradual decline, through war or environmental collapse, through the departure of teachers or the death of knowledge keepers, the technology was lost. Civilization fell back to simpler levels. The survivors carried memories, but memories fade and distort. Within generations, the machines became myths. The teachers became gods. The technology became magic. Modern science is only now beginning to rediscover some of what was lost. We've learned how Roman concrete works. We're experimenting with acoustic levitation. We're mapping ancient sites with satellite technology and finding patterns that suggest sophisticated planning. We're analyzing artifacts with techniques that reveal capabilities their creators supposedly couldn't have had. Each discovery confirms that we've underestimated the ancients, that they knew more, could do more, achieved more than our textbooks claim. But vast amounts remain lost, perhaps forever. Technologies that left no traces because they were organic, because they used materials that degraded completely. Knowledge that was never written down, passed orally from master to apprentice until the chain broke. Devices that were melted for their metal value, their purpose forgotten. Sites that lie beneath oceans or buried under miles of sediment, undiscovered and perhaps undiscoverable. The question is not whether ancient technology existed. The evidence is too substantial to dismiss entirely. The question is what we do with this knowledge now. Do we continue to insist that ancient peoples were primitive, dismissing evidence that contradicts this narrative? Or do we embrace the mystery, acknowledge that history is stranger and more complex than we imagined, and search for what remains to be found? Some believe we're on the verge of rediscovering lost technologies, that secrets hidden in ancient texts or buried in ruins could revolutionize our world if decoded correctly. Free energy from pyramid-like structures. Anti-gravity based on acoustic principles. Medical treatments using electromagnetic fields and crystal properties. Materials science based on lost metallurgical techniques. All of this might be waiting, encoded in symbols we cannot yet read, preserved in artifacts we haven't fully analyzed, hidden in sites we haven't excavated. Others warn that some knowledge was lost for good reason, that the ancient technologies were dangerous, that their misuse contributed to the catastrophes that destroyed previous civilizations. If nuclear weapons devastated ancient India, do we want to rediscover the principles that made them possible in even more accessible forms? If acoustic weapons could shatter stone, what would prevent them from shattering bone? If the Atlantean crystals grew so powerful they destroyed the continent, should we seek to recreate them? Perhaps some knowledge is meant to stay lost, at least until we've developed the wisdom to use it responsibly. Perhaps the ancients themselves recognized this, encoding their most dangerous knowledge in puzzles that only those with sufficient understanding could solve, ensuring that power wouldn't fall into unworthy hands. Imagine standing in a hidden chamber beneath the Sphinx, the Hall of Records that Edgar Cayce described. The walls are lined with crystal tablets, information encoded in lattice structures that can be read with the right technology. You activate a device, and the crystals begin to glow, projecting images and data. The history of Atlantis unfolds before you. The technology they possessed. The mistakes they made. The warnings they left for future civilizations. You see the moment when their power crystals overloaded, when the island began to break apart, when survivors fled carrying what knowledge they could preserve. You understand, finally, how they achieved so much and why it all came to an end. The knowledge is overwhelming, offering solutions to energy, medicine, transportation, problems humanity still struggles with. But it also shows the dangers, the seductive power of technology without wisdom, the ease with which tools become weapons, the fragility of civilizations that grow too complex and forget their foundations. Would you take this knowledge back to the surface? Would you share it with a world still divided, still armed with weapons of mass destruction, still struggling with environmental collapse? Or would you seal the chamber again, deciding humanity isn't ready, that the risk of repeating ancient mistakes is too great? This is the dilemma the lost technologies pose. Not just whether they existed, the evidence suggests they did, but whether we should seek to recover them and what we would do if we succeeded. The legacy of lost technology is not only in the artifacts and structures that survive. It's in the questions they force us to ask. Questions about who we are, where we came from, how much we've forgotten, and whether we're doomed to repeat the cycles of rise and fall that ancient texts describe. The Vedic Yugas speak of ages that cycle endlessly, golden ages of knowledge followed by silver, bronze, and iron ages of decline, then renewal. The Greeks described similar cycles with their ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. The Maya calendar marks great cycles of creation and destruction. Always the same pattern, rise and fall, knowledge gained and lost, civilization built and destroyed. Are we in another cycle? Have we climbed back to the level previous civilizations reached, or are we still below them in crucial ways? Our technology is different, based on electricity and digital computation rather than acoustic resonance and crystal matrices. But is it superior, or merely different? We can destroy the world with nuclear weapons, but perhaps so could the ancients with their Brahmastras. We can fly in airplanes, but perhaps they flew in Vimanas. We compute with silicon chips, but they computed with bronze gears and crystal lattices. We're rediscovering their methods through science, giving them new names, claiming them as modern inventions. But the ancients were there first, achieved these things with different approaches, left evidence we're only now learning to recognize. The humility this demands is profound. We're not the first. We're not the most advanced humanity has ever been. We're somewhere in the middle, recovering from a fall, climbing back toward heights our ancestors once reached. The recognition that we've been here before, that civilizations rise and fall, should inform everything we do. The technologies we develop, we should remember they can be lost. The knowledge we accumulate, we should preserve redundantly, in forms that will survive catastrophe. The wisdom to use technology responsibly, we should cultivate as urgently as the technology itself. Perhaps this is the true gift of lost technology. Not the devices and techniques we might recover, valuable as those might be. But the lesson, the warning written in ruins and artifacts, that everything we build can be lost, that knowledge is fragile, that civilizations are temporary unless we're very careful and very wise. The pyramids stand as monuments to this truth. They've outlasted the civilization that built them by millennia. They were designed to endure, perhaps to carry a message across ages. That message might be technical, encoded dimensions that preserve mathematical constants, alignments that record astronomical data. But it might also be simpler, more profound. We were here. We built this. We were greater than you imagine. And we are gone. Learn from us. Don't repeat our mistakes. Every artifact of lost technology carries this message. Every impossible stone, every sophisticated device, every ancient text describing wonders we dismiss as fantasy. They tell us that humanity has reached great heights before and fallen. They warn us that it can happen again, will happen again unless we're wiser than those who came before. As this journey ends, we're left not with answers but with deeper questions. The machines of the gods, whether built by humans with lost knowledge or left by visitors from elsewhere, existed. The evidence is too consistent, too widespread, too physical to dismiss. But what should we do with this knowledge? Should we search for more evidence, excavate sites that might hold secrets, decode texts that might contain technical knowledge? Should we apply what we learn, attempting to recreate ancient technologies and see if they work? Should we be cautious, recognizing that some knowledge might be dangerous, that the ancients might have encoded warnings as well as instructions? Perhaps the answer is balance. To search with curiosity but proceed with caution. To learn from the past while being mindful of its warnings. To recover lost knowledge while developing the wisdom to use it well. The technologies are out there, waiting. In museums and ruins, in buried chambers and encoded texts, in artifacts we've found but not understood and in sites we haven't yet discovered. Each piece of the puzzle brings us closer to understanding what our ancestors achieved and why it was lost. But the greatest technology might be wisdom itself. The ability to recognize patterns, to learn from history, to build sustainably rather than seeking only growth, to preserve knowledge rather than hoarding it, to use power responsibly rather than recklessly. If we can recover this wisdom along with the ancient technologies, we might finally break the cycle. We might become the civilization that doesn't fall, that learns from all who came before and builds something that endures. The machines of the gods are silent now. The gears have stopped turning. The power plants no longer hum. The flying machines rest in legends. But the evidence remains, scattered across continents and buried beneath time, waiting for eyes that can see and minds that can understand. We stand at a threshold. Behind us, thousands of years of forgotten history, lost technologies, and fallen civilizations. Before us, the possibility of recovery, of understanding, of learning from the past to build a better future. The choice is ours. Will we dismiss the evidence, cling to comfortable narratives of linear progress from primitive to advanced? Or will we embrace the mystery, accept that history is complex and cyclical, that we're rediscovering as much as discovering, that the ancients have much to teach if we're humble enough to learn? The artifacts are waiting. The temples stand ready to reveal their acoustic secrets. The texts hold knowledge we can decode if we try hard enough. The ruins whisper of techniques we can analyze with modern instruments. The stones challenge us to explain them. And somewhere, perhaps beneath ocean waves or desert sands, more evidence waits to be found. Devices still intact after millennia. Libraries preserved by chance or intention. Technologies we can't even imagine until we find them. The journey into lost technology is just beginning. What we've discovered so far, remarkable as it is, may be only fragments. The real secrets might still be hidden, waiting for the right moment, the right finder, the right questions. As we close this exploration, one truth becomes clear. The past is not dead. It's not even past. It lives in the structures that surround us, in the artifacts that puzzle us, in the texts that describe what we thought was impossible. It lives in our DNA, perhaps, if the ancients were correct about the mixing of divine and human. It lives in the patterns of civilization, rising and falling, learning and forgetting, building and destroying. And it lives in the questions we ask when we stand before a pyramid and wonder how, when we examine the Antikythera mechanism and marvel at its complexity, when we read descriptions of flying machines and ask if they could be real, when we see stones that fit perfectly without mortar and demand to know the secret. These questions drive us forward. They remind us that we don't know everything, that history holds surprises, that our ancestors might have been our equals or even our superiors in some domains. They humble us and inspire us simultaneously. And perhaps that's the greatest gift of lost technology. Not the devices themselves, valuable as their recovery might be. Not even the knowledge they represent, important as that is. But the sense of wonder, the recognition of mystery, the understanding that the universe is larger and stranger than our theories encompass. The machines of the gods challenge our assumptions. They force us to question narratives we've accepted without examination. They suggest possibilities we've dismissed as fantasy. They open doors we thought were closed. Behind those doors might lie technological secrets that could revolutionize our world. Or they might lead to deeper mysteries, puzzles within puzzles, questions that spawn more questions. Either way, the journey is worth taking. The exploration of lost technology is not just archaeology or history. It's philosophy, asking who we are and where we came from. It's science, testing theories against evidence. It's engineering, trying to understand and recreate what the ancients achieved. It's spirituality, confronting the possibility that we're part of a larger story, that beings greater than us might have shaped our past and perhaps watch our present. All of these threads weave together in the study of ancient technology. The physical artifacts, the mathematical patterns, the mythological accounts, the archaeological evidence, the engineering challenges. None of it makes sense in isolation. But together, it forms a picture, incomplete and disputed, but compelling. A picture of a world where technology has risen and fallen before, where knowledge has been gained and lost, where civilizations have touched heights we're only now approaching again. Whether this was achieved by humans alone or with outside help, whether it happened once or many times, whether it will happen again, these questions remain open. But the evidence that it happened is substantial and growing. Each new discovery, each refined analysis, each decoded text adds to the picture. We are learning, slowly, what our ancestors knew. And as we learn, we face the responsibility that comes with knowledge. The ancients, if legends are true, misused their technology. They built weapons that destroyed cities. They became arrogant, believing themselves gods. They forgot humility and paid with their civilizations. Can we learn from their mistakes? Can we recover their knowledge without repeating their errors? Can we become the generation that breaks the cycle, that builds sustainably, that preserves knowledge for future generations, that uses power wisely? These are not just academic questions. They're existential. Because we already possess technologies that could destroy civilization, nuclear weapons, biological warfare, climate modification. We already face challenges that could trigger collapse, environmental degradation, resource depletion, social fragmentation. We are, in many ways, at the same threshold the ancients reached. The moment when civilization's power exceeds its wisdom, when technology races ahead of ethics, when the ability to act outstrips the understanding of consequences. What we do next matters not just for us but for the future. If we fall, as previous civilizations apparently did, how much knowledge will we preserve? What will future archaeologists think when they uncover our ruins, find our computers corroded and unreadable, our books rotted away, our buildings collapsed? Will they dismiss us as primitive, unable to imagine we possessed nuclear power and space flight? Will they think our myths of flying to the moon are fantasy, impossible for ancients with their limited capabilities? We are creating our own legacy of lost technology, information stored in formats that won't last centuries, knowledge concentrated in specialists rather than spread broadly, systems so complex that their collapse would set humanity back generations. If we want to avoid becoming another mystery for future civilizations to puzzle over, we need to change course. To preserve knowledge redundantly, in multiple formats, some of which will survive any conceivable catastrophe. To build sustainably, creating systems that can endure rather than grow rapidly and collapse. To spread knowledge widely, ensuring that critical skills exist in many hands rather than few. To develop wisdom alongside technology, understanding the implications of what we create before we deploy it. The lost technologies of the ancients can guide us in this. They show what's possible and what's dangerous. They demonstrate that knowledge can be lost and must be protected. They prove that civilizations, no matter how advanced, are vulnerable to collapse. And they offer hope. Because if humanity has risen to great heights before and fallen, then perhaps we can rise again. Perhaps we have risen again. Perhaps each cycle climbs a little higher, learns a little more, preserves a little better than the last. Perhaps we're not doomed to endless repetition but are slowly, painfully, across millennia and civilizations, actually progressing. Learning not just technology but wisdom. Not just how to build but why. Not just power but responsibility. If this is true, then every artifact we recover, every text we decode, every site we excavate brings us closer to breaking the cycle. Closer to becoming the civilization that doesn't fall. Closer to leaving a legacy that won't be lost. The machines of the gods wait for us. In museums and ruins, in texts and traditions, in the very stones beneath our feet. They hold secrets, some we've begun to understand and many we haven't. They hold warnings of what we might become if we're not careful. And they hold promises of what we might achieve if we're wise. As we stand among these silent witnesses, the Antikythera mechanism behind glass, the Great Pyramid against the sky, the Sanskrit texts describing wonders, we have a choice. We can dismiss them, insist they're primitive or impossible or misunderstood. We can cling to comfortable narratives that place us at the pinnacle of human achievement. Or we can open ourselves to mystery, accept that history is stranger than we've been taught, that our ancestors might have been our equals, that we have much to learn from civilizations we've dismissed as primitive. The evidence demands this humility. The artifacts insist on it. The impossibilities of ancient construction, the sophistication of ancient devices, the knowledge recorded in ancient texts, all of it says the same thing: we've underestimated them. And in underestimating them, we've impoverished ourselves. Because the knowledge they possessed could help us now. The technologies they developed could solve problems we face. The wisdom they gained, including the wisdom to know what not to do, could guide us away from the precipice toward which we seem to be heading. So the exploration continues. Archaeologists dig in sites that might hold secrets. Linguists work on undeciphered scripts that might contain knowledge. Engineers analyze artifacts to understand their construction. Scientists apply new techniques to ancient materials, revealing properties we couldn't detect before. And slowly, piece by piece, the picture becomes clearer. The past was not what we thought. Our ancestors were not what we assumed. And we ourselves are part of a much longer story, inheritors of knowledge and mistakes from civilizations that came before, responsible for what we pass to those who come after. The machines of the gods are not just archaeological curiosities. They're messages from our own past, from other versions of ourselves who rose and fell before us. They tell us it's possible to reach great heights. They warn us those heights are dangerous. They show us that knowledge can be lost if not carefully preserved. And they challenge us to do better, to learn from their example, to become the civilization that breaks the cycle and endures. This is the true legacy of lost technology. Not the devices themselves, though their recovery would be valuable. Not even the knowledge they represent, though that too would be precious. But the perspective they offer, the understanding that we're not alone in time, that we're part of a pattern, that what we do matters not just for us but for the long arc of human civilization stretching back into the mists of prehistory and forward into an unknown future. The artifacts are waiting. The temples stand ready to yield their secrets. The texts can be decoded. The sites can be excavated. The technologies can be understood. What we need is the courage to look, the humility to learn, and the wisdom to apply what we find responsibly. Because the gods' machines, whether built by humans with forgotten knowledge or left by visitors from beyond, are not gone. They're sleeping, waiting for the generation wise enough to awaken them without repeating the mistakes that silenced them. Are we that generation? Time will tell. But the evidence of lost technology, scattered across the world in artifacts and ruins, in texts and traditions, offers both warning and hope. Warning that we can fall as others did. Hope that we can rise higher than any came before. The choice, as always, is ours. And the machines of the gods, silent for millennia, wait to see what we decide.